Hello there, my name is Anastasia Tarnavska, and now we will unveil the top news of recent days. The 2024 NATO summit in Washington, unlike last year's Vilnius meeting, was not focused on Ukraine. At the very least, the leadership of both the alliance and the host country were very keen to avoid the Ukrainization of the leaders' meeting. Because for President Biden, this summit also had pre-election weight and was important to avoid conflicts and public disputes, including on the part of Ukraine. In order for Ukraine not to feel insulted, it was offered the breach to NATO formula, which did not contain any breakthroughs or even significant gains compared to Vilnius. The only more or less important change was supposed to be NATO's declaration about the immediate launch of the procedures for Ukraine's accession to the alliance, when and if the conditions for it were met. A few weeks ago, at the beginning of the discussion of the project, the Friends of Ukraine suggested that the alliance go beyond the Vilnius framework and were add the phrase that Ukraine's movement towards membership is irreversible process in the definition of breach to NATO. However, the USA opposed this almost immediately with a fairly logical argument. They said, how can we give any guarantees if Ukraine itself in the past proved its ability to abandon the Euro-Atlantic goal? After all, this is exactly what happened during the term of Ukraine's pro-Russian President Yanukovych. However, a few days before the summit, news began to arrive from Washington about a sharp change in the US position. Unexpectedly for other allies, Washington changed its mind by 180 degrees, and irreversibility returned to the text of the decision, but in a slightly different wording than the Friends of Ukraine proposed from the beginning. So this point of the summit decision begins with the ambitious but declarative statement: the future of Ukraine is in NATO, after which the alliance undertakes a specific commitment.
Ukraine can and will stop Putin. Especially with our full collective support. They have our full support. Nearly 24 allied partners have signed the bilateral security agreements with Ukraine, and more countries will follow. Today, I'm announcing the historic donation of air defense equipment for Ukraine. The United States, Germany, the Netherlands, Romania, and Italy will provide Ukraine with the equipment for 5 additional strategic air defense systems. And in the coming months, the United States and our partners intend to provide Ukraine with dozens of additional tactical air defense systems. The United States will make sure that when we export critical air defense interceptors, Ukraine goes to the front of the line.
It would not be an exaggeration to say that the decision made in Washington became another point of no return in the integration of Ukraine into NATO. The fact that Ukraine aspires to be a member of the alliance does not need too much proof. This is confirmed by all opinion polls. After all, this is a provision of the Constitution of Ukraine. However, this has not yet been an axiom for many Western partners. Many players, including in the United States of America, believe that Ukraine's membership in the alliance should become a kind of bargaining coin in the negotiations with Putin about ending the war. It is believed that this was the reason for the previously mentioned scandalous Biden statements. NATO's decision also sends a signal to Putin that the alliance's intention to accept Ukraine is quite serious. This is not a formality, and even if one day Russia matures to the point of negotiating the terms of ending the war, the package of agreements is unlikely to include Ukraine's refusal of full membership in NATO, because the revision of the alliance's policy requires consensus, which will not be easy to achieve. Another block of the Washington's decision dedicated to Ukraine concerns financing. Here, the achieved results leaves much more uncertainty. Moreover, at the first glance, everything sounds very positive. The NATO summit agreed on a plan for financing the defense of Ukraine for 2025, and the members of the alliance unanimously committed themselves to the fact that Ukraine will receive base funding of at least 40 billion euros during the next year. And NATO declares the goal of such a development of the armed forces so that Ukraine will have the ability to defeat Russian aggression and deter it in the future. The alliance also separately signed and almost unanimously agreed on a document entitled pledge of long-term security assistance to Ukraine. One state immediately declared that it would not participate in security assistance to Ukraine, and that, of course, was Hungary. But at the same time, Budapest did not begin to promise this decision, but immediately informed the allies that it was simply staying away. The rest of the states agreed that the 40 billion euro coverage would include purchase of military equipment for Ukraine, free transfer of weapons and other equipment, cost for maintenance and logistics of military equipment for Ukraine, cost of training soldiers of the defense forces of Ukraine, operational expenses related to the provision of military support, investments in Ukraine's defense infrastructure and defense industry, and contribution to NATO's trust fund for Ukraine. Meanwhile, Russia has already reacted to NATO summit. As always, the former president Dmitry Medvedev was the first. I will remind you that earlier in an interview with Moscow Times, he urged to prepare for a complete takeover of Ukraine after signing peace with Kyiv. And today he wrote, I quote, "The Washington summit declaration of July 10th mentions the irreversible path of Ukraine to NATO. For Russia, two possible ways of how this path ends are acceptable. Either Ukraine disappears or NATO does. Still better, both." But we all know that if Moscow reacts, the alliance is doing everything right. Russians are preparing teenagers for war in 2024. More than 140,000 Russian teenagers from all regions of the country took part in the military sports game Victory, the Ministry of Defense reports in its Telegram channel. As part of the competition, boys and girls demonstrated their training in providing medical care to the wounded, clearing mines, shooting, operating drones, and other skills necessary in war. Last November, Vladimir Putin, at the meeting of the World Russian People's Council, said that not only teachers and parents, but also religious figures, as well as sports and military patriotic organizations, should take part in the education of younger generation of Russians. According to the dictator, only such an approach will preserve a free people who understand their responsibility to today and future generations. In February, Russian Deputy Prime Minister Tatyana Golikova said that the system of patriotic education in Russia by the end of 2024 would cover about 72% of children and youth aged 5 to 19 years old. The Presidential Grants Foundation also determined the winners of the competition among projects for organizing children's recreation. Most of the approved applications involved spending holidays in military patriotic camps, where children were intended to be taught how to pray and handle weapons. Various projects promise to protect the younger generation from gadgets and blurring of the boundaries of gender roles, teach traditional values, and protection of the native land. The programs included the course on mine detection. The authors of the idea proposed to test the acquired skills in practice in the occupied part of the Luhansk region of Ukraine. It was proposed to appoint priests and participants in the war against Ukraine as mentors. At the beginning of July, as a part of a federal project stimulating demand for domestic unmanned aerial systems, 523 schools and 30 colleges in Russia began conducting drone control courses. For these purposes, educational institutions were equipped with specialized classrooms, training areas, small and main flight areas, 3D printing areas, as well as repair rooms. Well, as we see, Moscow is preparing for war for years. The question is the West ready? That concludes today's video. Thank you for watching. Stay updated, comment, like, and subscribe to the UATV English channel for more news from Ukraine. Your support really matters. Goodbye.